Journalist Jonathan Manthorpe has been posted to most of the world's war zones and hot spots. He has covered his share of major wars, famines, and social upheavals. He was European correspondent for Southern News. He is the international affairs columnist for the Vancouver Sun. He blogs about global events on his blog called Dispatches, and it is my pleasure to welcome Jonathan Manthorpe back to Studio 4 to tell us more.
Morning, Fanny.
No rest for the weary. No rest for you this week.
No, not for the last few weeks.
I was reading your column, I believe it was yesterday, about the cost and the threats of imposing a no-fly zone over Libya.
Well, that's the big issue today that NATO and the EU ministers are starting to talk about in Brussels. And there's no consensus. I would be very surprised if they imposed one. It's possible, but the US is really holding out on this unless there's a United Nations resolution, and the chances of getting a UN Security Council resolution are zip, I think, because Russia and China will block it because it would be a precedent which could cause intervention in their countries.
Okay, so Russia and China will veto
Yep.
it. So the idea of a resolution at a United Nations level, not probably going to happen.
Which means the US won't back a no-fly zone because Obama and Hillary Clinton have made it clear that they are not going to intervene in Libya without UN legal backing.
And Defense Minister Gates as well.
Oh, he was ahead of the pack on that one. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when they say no-fly zone, what are the rules? What does that mean?
Well, it means several things. First, it means that you have to destroy Gaddafi's anti-aircraft facilities on the ground. And he's got anti-aircraft missiles, he's got anti-aircraft guns. Basically, you have to go and declare war on Libya to begin with. It's not just a matter of flying around and shooting down anything in the sky. You basically have to declare war on Libya. And that's a very, very major step. It's not just a matter of stopping stuff flying. That will inevitably escalate into intervention, probably on the ground. And the US and other NATO allies really are very, very reluctant to take that step, particularly when you're already deeply involved in Iraq and Afghanistan. And attacking or invading another Muslim country is not going to be good for the world's balance of politics, is it?
I doubt. At a ground level, certainly, I'm sure the United States doesn't want to go in with being that they're a bit stretched.
And even the rebels don't want them. And even the rebels don't want them on the ground. The rebels saying they'd like a no-fly zone, but they don't want them on the ground. I'm really I have severe doubts whether a no-fly zone would achieve much anyway. The rebels are vastly outgunned on the ground with government tanks and artillery, and the rebels have lost the oil port of Ras Lanouf this morning. The Gaddafi forces are beginning to roll up a number of the towns along the coast that the rebels have taken in the last 2 or 3 weeks. The rebels are lightly armed, they're untrained, and they're basically in retreat at the minute.
So the tipping point will be, I know that's a question
Well,
hard to answer, but at this point, so Gaddafi has tanks and artillery. The rebels aren't armed like that. They don't have probably the coordination he has.
No, I mean, a lot of these guys are just learning how to clean an AK-47. I mean, they're not trained at all. I think the tipping point is the next few days and what comes out of Brussels, the meetings of NATO and the EU. Gaddafi has a major weakness, and that is that he's relying on mercenaries, from mostly African mercenaries from neighboring African countries, and he has to pay them. And he's paying them about $1,000 a day, we're told, each of them.
Right.
Now, so the matter is, how long does his money last? The Libyan army is nothing. It's the mercenaries that are keeping them there. He's got about 4,000 of them. He has apparently stored a lot of money, a lot of cash to pay these guys, but he's not getting any revenue from oil. Even if he does get control of the oil ports, there's not going to be any. He's not going to be able to export oil while sanctions are in place. So it's really a matter of whether he can recapture the key places, and particularly, I guess, in the end, Benghazi, which is the rebel stronghold. If he can capture recapture those major centers before his cash runs out.
And who are these mercenaries exactly? Why do they want to work for Gaddafi? Is
Well,
it because of the
$1,000 a day.
money?
Yes.
It's just the money,
Yeah,
no
yeah.
conscience?
No.
He's given them something, they're giving back what?
No, it's money. It's they come from. There's some from Chad. There's some from African areas of Sudan. Some from other parts of West Africa. You want to start a war in Africa and you've got enough money. It's not a problem. There's plenty of guns and there are plenty of people with experience in wars who will rally, and for $1,000 a day in Africa goes a long way.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
So just for the money, really?
Yep. Oh yeah. No,
The greed.
there's very little loyalty to Gaddafi anywhere in that administration at all. So even if he wins, how long he can hold on afterwards, I think, is very much in question. I think basically he's gone. It's just a matter of how much pain he can cause before he goes out the exit.
Okay, so at this point, does he have troop discipline? I mean, if you have mercenaries and then you have the army or the Libyan army, how do you keep everybody coordinated if you're a Gaddafi?
Well, the Libyan army is not a big factor. It never was very large. He was always very clever at minimizing the authority of the army, because in so many places where you have a dictator, the army becomes the guy who, or the body on whom you depend and who can get rid of you.
Right.
He's been very cunning at making sure there are no other centers of power. So there's not a major army, and he kept it divided amongst tribes as
Right.
well.
So who's on his side, like a Mugabe in Zimbabwe?
Well,
Is he
there are a few loyalists.
talking? I guess they're
Yeah.
talking.
There are a few loyalists, and those will be mostly people whose security and whose power depends on his power. But it'll be a fairly small coterie, as you mentioned Mugabe in Zimbabwe, same situation. And of course, people who might wind up in the International Criminal Court in the same dock with Gaddafi if
that
and when
happens.
everything collapses.
But he's defiant at this point, as you point out, every day. But when the defiant Gaddafi gets together with foreign correspondents to
Yeah.
have a little chat,
Yeah.
or even try to dialogue with rebels, and I don't know if that's happened,
No, not as far as I
just
know.
refused it.
Yep.
What does he say?
Well,
What are they talking
he
about?
goes into these 3-hour rants, which we've seen on the TV. He has, of course, dispatched yesterday some emissaries to Cairo to talk to the Gulf Cooperation Group and also the Arab League, and also to Europe to talk to NATO and Brussels. I haven't seen any reports yet of what those talks have produced, if anything. I rather doubt if they've produced anything at all, quite honestly.
Okay.
This is not a situation that can be negotiated, I don't think.
If not negotiated, and Libya slides into all-out civil war.
Yeah. Well, I think it is in all-out civil war now. So I think that the issues facing the NATO and the European Union in Brussels the next couple of days are very crucial ones. When there have been interventions by NATO before, it has been either because there was an attack on a member state, such as the Al-Qaeda attack from Afghanistan, and of course the putative and, as it turned out, quite erroneous attacks on the US from Iraq. Or there has been some justification, legal justification from the United Nations. We don't have either of those situations at the moment. Gaddafi has not recently attacked the United States. He did back in the 1980s and got bombed for it, but he hasn't recently. So or any other NATO member. So there's no legal basis for NATO intervention at the moment, unless you can really make a humanitarian case.
Yes, which I'm sure they can.
But will China and Russia go along with it?
Doubt it.
And I doubt it very much. So we're in a bit of a fix here.
Yes, interesting meeting in Brussels, I'm sure. I will come back with Jonathan Manthorpe after this.